The Mexican government just held their own congressional UFO hearing. And while you might be tempted to compare it to the one that we had here recently in the US, the Mexican government decided to take a slightly different approach.
UFOologist J.B. Mousen brought two caskets of a sort into the congressional chambers and revealed what was inside what he claimed to be the small, stuffed bodies of extraterrestrials.
Okay, so before I get into what I think about this particular unveiling,
bullshit?
This was not actually the sole focus of this hearing, despite the disproportionate media coverage that it's received. You may even recognize some of the familiar faces at the speaker lineup of this hearing, including former US Navy pilot Ryan Graves. Now, Graves was at the hearing to give his familiar pitch about the threat that UAPs pose to aviation safety and to encourage other pilots to come forward. But because somebody failed to do a basic Google search on some of the other speakers at the congressional hearing, I now get to spend the next few minutes talking to you about a very different story rather than focusing on some of the things that might have lended more credibility to the UFO disclosure movement. In fact, by the end of this video, I think you'll agree with me, this stunt may have just set us back several years from getting towards full disclosure. Okay, so why am I calling BS on this guy? Well, rather than just read to you the dozens of articles that have come out about Jaime Maussan since this event, I thought I'd take a slightly different approach and do what a Mexican congressional staffer should have done before booking him for this event. And that is, try to figure out if this guy claiming to have alien mummies is actually legit before I allow him to present this stuff to the rest of the world. And perhaps not surprisingly, it didn't actually take me that long to get an answer to that question. You see, back in 2017, 2018, there were several mummies that popped up from Peru that looked oddly non-human. Now, it was common practice among the Nazca people in ancient Peru to mummify human remains, and they often did so by posing the bodies in a sitting fetal position. But a few of these so-called mummies that appeared around this time had the unusual characteristics of only having 3 elongated fingers and toes. And as you can imagine, some overzealous people immediately got a hold of these mummies and claimed to have evidence of aliens. Now, being the good congressional staffer that I am, if I had done a basic Google search about Mr. Maussan when he came calling, I would have stumbled across that information pretty quickly. And I know that because that's exactly what happened to me. And being the naturally skeptical congressional staffer that I would be, when Mr. Maussan came calling claiming to have evidence of alien mummies himself, I might have a reasonably skeptical reaction.
Do you smell shit? I smell shit!
And lucky for me, I wouldn't have been the only person feeling this way. You see, back in 2018, when these mummies initially popped up, there was some pretty interesting information that came out about them. Alien mummies appear to be a mix of looted body parts. I found this article written in 2018. This week, reports and bizarre images of a group of 5 mummy-like bodies from Peru that have 3-fingered hands led to claims by some that the mummies are not human and may be aliens. Life Science has found that some of these mummies may represent a combination of the looting and manipulation of real human mummy parts. One of the mummies looks like a typical Nazca mummy in the flexed, seated position. Grotesquely, the hands and feet seen on this mummy, and possibly the others, may also be parts of real human mummies that have been manipulated by forgers, the white coating added afterward to hide the manipulation. A number of other researchers also believe that real human mummy parts were used to create these fakes. A dozen Peruvian mummy researchers have put out a statement condemning the practice, saying that it has violated numerous national and international norms. Not looking too good so far for Mr. Maussan's speaking slot. The mummies were supposedly discovered in 2015 by tomb robbers working in the Nazca region, an area where the ancient Nazca culture flourished. The head of the looting group is Mario. Mario is a treasure hunter. He is a delinquent who is well known to the police services of the Nazca region. His group has looted archaeological sites on the Peruvian coast for more than 20 years, and justice does not do much to stop him. Videos showing investigations of the mummies have appeared on the sites Gaia.com and the AlienProject.com. While some mummies in Peru have been discovered by scientists, others, such as the ones that may have been used to create these aliens, are stolen by looters who are known to ransack ancient Peruvian tombs before archaeologists are able to scientifically excavate them. The United States has restricted the import of artifacts from Peru in an attempt to stem the tide of looting. But what about the claim that Mr. Maussan made that he had done DNA analysis on the mummies and found that only 70% of the mummies had human DNA and the remaining 30% appeared to be not human? Mr. Maussan's presentation stunned many in scientific circles in Mexico. After images of the mummies began circulating, the Institute of Physics at the National Autonomous University of Mexico released a statement making it clear that its researchers had never examined the specimens themselves, but had merely done carbon testing in 2017 on skin samples provided by a client. The university lab which did the testing disassociates itself from any use, interpretation, or subsequent misrepresentation of the results it provides. In no case do we draw conclusions about the origin of these samples. Now, that information obviously didn't come out until after images of these mummies started circulating around the world, but still, as a congressional staffer, it would have been a pretty easy ask to ask for that evidence up front before agreeing to book this guy for a speaking slot. So again, as a congressional staffer, what I'm left with is a guy who claims to have some pretty flimsy evidence at best and has already bought into a old familiar scam. But you know, sometimes it's good to get different perspectives. And on that note, I'd like to introduce the newest member of the Exospace team and get her take on it. Willow, what do you make of this UFO hearing? Do you think they just muddied the waters around the entire disclosure movement? Or do you think they should have just focused on the science? Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's actually a good point you brought up. See, Ryan Graves himself, who even testified at the event, has already come out publicly to try to distance himself from these alien mummies. After the US congressional UFO hearing, I accepted an invitation to testify before the Mexican Congress, hoping to keep up the momentum of government interest and pilot experiences with UAP. Unfortunately, yesterday's demonstration was a huge step backwards for this issue. My testimony centered on sharing my experience and the UAP reports I hear from commercial and military aircrew through ASA's Witness program. I will continue to raise awareness of UAP as an urgent matter of aerospace safety, national security, and science, but I am deeply disappointed by this unsubstantiated stunt. But you know, the more I've been thinking about this, the more I've been thinking, maybe this is a good lesson for everyone. Because let's be honest with ourselves here. Let's have a real honest moment. There's a lot of BS in the UFO community out there. And it makes it really hard for the average person who's not immersed in this stuff and has bills to pay to keep track of any of it or to take any of it seriously. And the more we invite in the Eric Heckers and the Jamie Maussans of the world, the more we risk tipping over this ship right before it gets to shore. And now I also have to acknowledge there's a certain degree of skepticism in the UFO community about whether or not this guy was allowed to deliberately pull this stunt to undermine the entire movement. And while I don't have any evidence of that, the more these things start to happen, the more some of that starts to sound a little bit more plausible. We are finally getting to a point of real momentum in this disclosure movement, and people are actually starting to take it seriously. But if we're actually going to get anywhere near full disclosure in our lifetimes, the movement has to be led by intelligent, credible people who are willing to put their careers on the line in pursuit of the truth. Not obvious con men willing to throw away their own reputation and take everybody down with them. People like this end up getting shredded by the internet within 24 hours, and it makes the entire movement look ridiculous. So as much as it's fun to talk about these things, I don't want to dedicate any more time to this obvious sideshow. Let's keep our eye on the prize, focus on the real data, the real science that's been put out by credible people, and weed out some of the people who maybe shouldn't be on the stage. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe button yet, please do so, and I will catch you guys on the next one.